Generally speaking.
About crime.
About crime, yeah.
Yeah.
What's this called again? We keep changing the name.
We keep changing it, that's right. Are you going to make me guess what it's about?
No.
Okay. Is it? I'm going to guess it's a murder. That's my guess. Really? It's not a murder? Kidnapping. Bank robbery?
No. That was so last few months.
That's so Patty Hearst.
You won't be able to guess, because you know what?
It's probably not a skyjacking, because we've already done that.
I broke the rules, because I chose to do someone who disappeared.
Okay.
No crime was really committed. This was a story that has fascinated me for a long time, and I think we discussed it on the intro.
Oh, I know who we're talking about.
Who are we talking about?
Amelia Earhart.
Yes. Are you disappointed?
No, I'm excited. That's awesome.
All right.
I was really worried that you were going to pick somebody that I'd never heard of, and I'm like...
Like Bobby Smith?
Yeah, right. I'm like...
Everyone knows Bobby Smith.
I feel like I'm pretty up on crimes. I know that sounds weird, but like I've watched every episode of Unsolved Mysteries like 50 times.
But wouldn't it be fascinating to hear about something... or a crime that you didn't know existed?
Yeah, that would be interesting too. I feel like I'd be sitting here like not having anything to contribute. So I'm glad I'm also fascinated with Amelia Earhart.
Do you have something to contribute to the story?
Probably. Okay. Yeah. But I'm going to let you take it away, and I'm going to hear the story of Amelia Earhart.
Okay. All right. So first of all, as I already said, that I brought this up during the intro, like what really got me started into like unsolved mysteries and true crime. Like Amelia Earhart definitely stuck with me during middle school and high school. Then I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts called Against the Odds, which I know I talked to you about.
Yep. I haven't tried it yet. I just finished a podcast, so I'm looking for something else to listen to. So
okay. Yep. Well, so Amelia Earhart was one of the subjects of this podcast, and this podcast really tells the story of different situations that are difficult to get out of. There usually are survivors.
Okay.
It tells how these people survived whatever terrible situation they were in. So some of the stories they told was the Chilean mine rescue, the K2 mountain rescue, Teddy Roosevelt's Amazon expedition, the Donner Party, submarine rescue, which is the Squalus, which I was
which one?
To you about. The submarine rescue.
Oh, okay.
The Squalus.
Not familiar with that one. Do I know that one? Which one was?
I was talking to your husband about that.
Oh, okay. Maybe he's probably a Navy guy. He's a Navy guy, so he would probably know that.
So I said, stand back here. You don't know what we're talking about.
Right. Makes sense.
So I also went to AmeliaEarhart.com.
Okay.
Her official website, History.com. They were my other sources. What I liked about the podcast was that it really focused on everything that she accomplished leading up to her disappearance. So the disappearance was probably only like a 10-minute mention in the podcast, which surprised me. I was expecting to hear a lot more. But it was all, the story of how she came to be. And I think that's true in that we don't ever hear about that really. Like Amelia Earhart's mostly known for her disappearance. Yeah.
But she was an amazing pilot. I mean, she was ahead of her time really in many ways, so.
Yeah. So I don't think enough credit is given to what she accomplished. So let's dive into this, shall we?
Yes, we shall.
Okay. So Amelia Earhart, she was born in Kansas to her parents, Amy and Edwin Earhart, on July 24th, 1897. She did have a younger sister, Muriel, who was born a couple years later. She lived primarily with her maternal grandparents in Kansas during the school year and spent summers with her parents in Kansas City then. And despite her grandmother's approval or disapproval, Amelia spent her free time roaming the outdoors. So she was riding her imaginary horses, climbing trees, sledding, and hunting. And then she also kept a scrapbook of newspaper clippings about successful women in predominantly male-oriented fields, including film direction and production, law, advertising, management, and mechanical engineering. So you could probably tell at a young age she was already looking to do more than what the typical woman was doing back then.
Right.
So in 1908, saw an airplane for the first time at the Iowa State Fair, and later recalled being unimpressed.
That's funny. Well, she would have been what, a teenager then when she first saw her? She was born when?
1897. So
okay, so
quite.
Yeah.
The next few years were very turbulent for her. Her family moved around a lot because her grandmother passed away, and she was her primary caretaker. and her father was an alcoholic. So Amelia and her mother and her sister moved to Chicago. And she excelled in her studies and graduated from Hyde Park High School in Chicago. She went on to attend the Ogan's School, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is an exclusive finishing school outside of Philadelphia. She excelled in her studies, but she did not graduate, choosing instead to volunteer at Toronto's Spadina Military Hospital as a nurse for wounded World War I soldiers. And she began to spend time watching pilots in the Royal Flying Corps train at a local airfield while in Toronto. And then while in Toronto, she attends a flying exposition with a friend. A stunt pilot dove at Amelia and her friend while they were on the ground, but Amelia just stood there. And she points to this incident as a personal awakening. So that was the point of her life where she knew she wanted to fly.
Gotcha.
And then in 1919, Amelia entered the pre-med program at Columbia University, but after a year decided to leave to join her parents who had reunited in Los Angeles. It was here that she attended an air show on Long Beach with her father. With famed World War I pilot Frank Hawk, she took her first ride in an airplane and became hooked on flying.
Wow.
And then in 1921, she began to take flying lessons and to pay for her lessons and eventually her first plane. She worked a variety of jobs, including truck driver, photographer, and stenographer. And she passed her flying test and was issued a pilot's license, and she began her flying career. She was also able to purchase a Kinner Airster biplane.
Okay.
It was yellow, so she called it the Canary.
Can make sense.
2 days later, after receiving that pilot's license, she flew in the Pacific Coast Ladies Derby in Pasadena. So she was already on a roll.
Wow.
Days later, after receiving that pilot's license, she flew in the Pacific Coast Ladies Derby in Pasadena. So she was already on a roll.
Wow.
In 1922, so just about a year later, she set an unofficial altitude record for female pilots after flying the Canary to 14,000 feet on a solo flight.
Wow, that's pretty high for a biplane, I would think.
Yeah. And then in 1923, she was issued an international pilot's license, becoming the 16th woman ever to achieve this. 1924, so as I said, like every year she's accomplishing something. But she did in 1924 take a break from flying due to family upheaval. She tried again at Columbia University, but decided to return to Boston and find work as a teacher and social worker. But while working at the Dennison House, which is a settlement house for immigrants, she helped publicize a fundraiser by dropping hundreds of pamphlets from her plane.
From her plane, yeah.
And that stunt helped to catch the eye of a publisher looking for his next big seller.
Oh.
So one afternoon then, in April of 1928, a phone call came for Amelia at work asking, "How would you like to be the first woman to fly the Atlantic?"
Ooh, that sounds exciting.
To which Amelia said, what did she say?
No.
Yes! So,
I always guess wrong when you ask me this.
50-50 chances.
I know, right?
After an interview in New York with the project coordinators, including the book publisher and publicist George P. Putnam, she was asked to join pilot Wilmer Bill Stutz and co-pilot mechanic Louis E. Slim Gordon. What I liked about the podcast that I mentioned earlier was that they really go into detail how difficult it was to get the seaplane off the ground, or off the water, I should say.
Yeah.
They were chucking things into the water to lighten the load because they couldn't get the plane to take off.
Oh, wow. This was a seaplane they were trying to...
It was a seaplane they were trying. Because they figured it would be safer if if they had to land.
Yeah, they could land.
Over the ocean, they can at least land in the water.
Right.
And one of the pilots had quite the fondness for the drink. So that was aggravating, I think, to Amelia, too. It's like, it's time to take off, but then one of the pilots had a hangover.
Right. Well, it sounds like she has a family history of alcoholism, too.
True.
So, yeah, that probably bothered her a lot.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the team left Newfoundland. Now, I'm afraid to even try to pronounce the name of this plane.
Okay.
So it's Fokker.
Oh, yeah. I can see why. No, I think that's a plane,
It's a
yeah,
F-7 named
yeah.
the Friendship. So we'll just.
I'm not going to say it either because I think if I say it, it will come out wrong. But I think that's the name of a plane company or something like that's.
And then Alexis will have to bleep it out.
Yeah, it's called the beep F-17 or whatever. What was it? F something?
What was Amelia riding around in? Jeez.
What was it? It was a
F-O-K-K-E-R.
Yeah, and what was the rest? Huh? Okay.
Anyway.
Wasn't there a movie with like the meet the Fockers or something? Hey, meet my plane. This is the Fokker. What was it? F-14 or something.
That's why I was trying to put a long O on it just to take that away.
Fokker, yeah.
Fokker.
Okay, yeah. It's not as much fun as the other way to say it, but no, I think pretty sure that's the name of a company. It's like Boeing or something like that's, yeah.
So anyway, they took off June 17, 1928, and they arrived in Wales approximately 21 hours later.
Wow, that's cool.
This landmark flight made headlines worldwide because 3 pilots had died within the year trying to be the first woman to fly across the Atlantic before them. And when the crew returned to the United States, they were greeted with a ticker tape parade in New York and a reception held by President Calvin Coolidge at the White House.
Wow.
Amelia did not think she deserved any acclaim for being the first woman passenger on a transatlantic flight.
So she wasn't actually doing the flying?
Actually fly.
Oh, okay.
She was a passenger.
Okay.
She said, Stokes did all the flying he had to. I was just baggage like a sack of potatoes. And then she added, maybe someday I'll try it alone. So in summer of 1928, this is a little bit later in the year, her book about the Friendship was published, and it was called 20 Hours, 40 Minutes. And that was published by George Putnam. And it quickly promoted her to celebrity status. She went on a national book tour, endorsed products like Lucky Strike cigarettes, even though she didn't smoke, and Modern Earhart luggage. And she became known as Liddy Lindy because of her resemblance to Charles Lindbergh. And then she also became aviation editor for Cosmopolitan magazine. So in August of 1929, Amelia bought another airplane, a single-engine Lockheed Vega. In the Vega, she participated in the women's air derby race from Santa Monica to Cleveland, coming in 3rd place. And then November 2nd, 1929, she helped found the 99s, which is the first organization for women aviators. She became the first president in 1931 and held that position for 2 years, during which time she also used her celebrity status to promote the growth of American commercial airlines. Then on July 5th, 1930, Amelia set the women's world flying speed record of 101.18 miles per hour.
Wow.
Between 1930 and 1935, she set 7 women's speed and distance records. February 7th, 1931, she married George Putnam.
She married the publisher?
Yep. Who was also married.
Wait.
Scandal.
He was divorced, though.
Yeah, well.
Okay. Or,
yeah,
I don't mean to get ahead of your
story here. I didn't go into that.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, I didn't go into the marital drama, but we can certainly do that right now.
Great, okay.
The podcast mentioned he was quite taken with her, and he was married at the time, and his wife became frustrated and just left because she could tell that
he was in love with somebody else.
Yes.
Yep.
Not to say that anything had happened. It's just he was clearly enamored by her. When I did some further research, it sounded like his wife was having an affair somewhere else. So really, it worked out for everybody.
Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting because I've seen things about Amelia Earhart, and it never.
I know.
It didn't really mention too much about her husband, and I did not realize it was her publisher. So that's interesting.
Yep. So wary of the institution of marriage, Amelia refused George's proposal 6 times before she agreed. It's like, all right.
You wore me down.
She emphasized that her marriage was a partnership with dual control. So she kept her last name.
Right.
And I believe they kept it like an open marriage, like, she...
We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, you filled the blank there. And there was no such thing as just the man being the breadwinner.
Right, because she was successful in her own right, it sounds like. I mean, she's like setting records and, she's involved in different organizations and really becoming pretty popular in the United
Oh, yeah, she
States.
didn't need him.
Yeah.
So in 1932, Amelia wrote her second book. Well, maybe she didn't need him. She wrote her second book, The Fun of It. And then May 20th, 1932, her and George started work on secret plans for her to become the first woman and the second person to fly solo across the Atlantic.
Okay.
So, of course, the first being
Charles
George
Lindbergh.
Yep. So say George Lindbergh.
Yep.
Charles Lindbergh.
Charles Lindbergh, yep.
On May 20th, 1932, 5 years to the date after Lindbergh, she took off from Newfoundland to Paris. Strong north winds, icy conditions, and mechanical problems plagued the flight and forced her to land in a pasture near Londonderry, Ireland. So
I've been to Londonderry. I know where that is.
yeah, I think there's even like a marker or a museum there.
Okay, that was not on our tour. Now I'm gonna have to go back.
Yeah, go back. So as word of her flight spread, the media surrounded her both overseas and in the U.S. President Herbert Hoover presented Earhart with a gold medal from the National Geographic Society.
Very nice.
And Congress awarded her with the Distinguished Flying Cross, the first ever given to a woman. In 1932, she became, actually later that year, August of 1932, Amelia became the first woman to fly solo across the North American continent and back. 1933, she flew across North America for a second time, breaking her own record with a faster flight time. 1934, she received the Harmon Trophy for America's Outstanding Airwoman for the third year in a row.
Wow.
January 11th, 1935, she was the first person to fly solo from Honolulu, Hawaii to Oakland, California.
That's a long flight. I mean, I've flown to Hawaii, not from Oakland to Hawaii, but that's a long time in the air. I mean, on today's jets,
Yes.
like that would have been, that's a lot of time over the ocean.
Mm-hmm. And she also flew solo from Los Angeles to Mexico City, and later from Mexico City to New York. And then in between flights, she worked as a career counselor to women at Purdue University.
Yeah, good for her.
Yes, so
Yeah,
she's just
she's just flying all over the place. And you have to think about like the planes that they were flying then are not what we have now. So, you know,
No.
none of the amenities that we have on like
and that
planes.
was the interesting thing, actually, the friendship that I mentioned. They were lightening their load, trying to get that seaplane to take off. When they started finally take off, I think one of the pilots like fell against one of the doors and the door busted open.
Okay.
So then they had to like tie it closed and use like a gas can as the weight to keep it shut for the entire
That's crazy.
plane ride.
Yeah.
It's like I couldn't even imagine.
That was what they flew across the Atlantic?
Yeah.
That's.
And there was stories about what else had happened during that flight that you just don't know about how dangerous it is.
Right.
Until you hear these
Oh,
stories.
yeah. Although I think at this time in like aviation history, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but they're making a lot of there are a lot of advances in like aeronautical technology and stuff. So planes are coming a long way from like what she saw in 1907 to what she's flying in 1935.
Yeah.
So.
Well, true.
Yeah.
It's not like those rickety like
Right.
pasted together with sticks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. She's nearing her 40th birthday. She was ready for a monumental and final challenge. She wanted to be the first woman to fly around the world. And her husband planned for this world flight, raising money and consulting with advisors, mechanics, and navigators. And then Purdue University financed a new plane for Amelia, a Lockheed Electra 10E. And then March 17th, 1937, Amelia and her navigator, Fred Noonan, along with Captain Harry Manning and stunt pilot Paul Mance, fly the first leg of the trip from Oakland, California to Honolulu.
So there was 4 people in the plane for the
Well,
first?
but
Okay.
You'll see why.
Oh, okay, all right.
So they flew from Oakland to Honolulu, which you mentioned. This was like the reverse of that flight
Yeah,
that
yeah,
she had done before. So just to give you an idea how long that took them, it was 15 hours and 47 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, that's
And
crazy.
what, it's like 6 hours?
Yeah, I mean, so when we went to Honolulu, we flew from Atlanta to Honolulu, so.
Oh, okay, it's a little,
It's a little bit longer, but even then, like, we left at 10 a.m. Atlanta time and got to Honolulu at 3 o'clock their time, so.
yeah. But there's no way flying from Oakland today to Honolulu.
It would not take 15 hours.
Yeah. So when they try to continue from Honolulu 3 days later, so they want to continue on with that trip, the around the world trip, the plane ground loops during takeoff and they have to call off the flight because it severely damaged the plane.
Wait, what happened to it?
It ground loops. It sounded like that was like an electrical problem.
Oh, okay.
And it severely damaged the plane. So then they couldn't continue on.
Okay.
So despite the botched attempt, Amelia had that twin engine Electra rebuilt. And she had said, I have a feeling that there is just one more good flight left in my system, and I hope this trip is it, she said. So June 1st, 1937, a little bit later in the year, earlier in the year, they had tried flying around the world. This is their second attempt. This time, they're departing from Miami, Florida, with the plan of traveling from west to east. So before, they were traveling from east to west,
right?
Which some will say that was a fatal mistake because that was going to make the first leg of the trip. If they continued on how it was originally planned, that first leg of the trip would have included Howland Island, which is the island she was looking for when she disappeared.
Right.
She was really nervous about finding that island. And so,
it's pretty tiny. It's not very big, like either lengthwise or I'm sure it was hard to see. Yeah.
It was a crazy size. I think I have that in here too. Just they thought that if she could have handled that landing like early on in the trip when she was not as fatigued, she would have been able to do it. But because they had that ground loop malfunction, they switched plans around, and so Howland Island came up toward the end of the trip.
Okay, because they're going west to east, so they've already gone over like Africa and then so they're coming out to Howland Island, like they're coming back towards the United States.
Right.
Okay.
So this time, though, Fred Noonan is the only crewman, crew member on the second flight. So at this point, they had completed nearly 22,000 miles of the flight, and as you said, they stopped in South America, Africa, India, and New Guinea. By June 29th, when they landed in New Guinea, all but 7,000 miles had been completed, so they only had 7,000 miles left. Frequently, inaccurate maps had made navigation difficult for Noonan, and their next hop, Howland Island, was by far the most challenging. Howland Island is located 2,556 miles from Lae, New Guinea in the mid-Pacific. It's 1.5 miles long and half a mile wide.
Right.
So that's what they had to deal with.
Right.
It's like, why didn't you pick somewhere?
There's no bigger island out there?
Like nothing out there. But
every
unessential item was removed from the plane to make room for additional fuel, which gave Amelia approximately 274 extra miles. The U.S. Coast Guard cutter Atiska, I think is how you pronounce it, which was a radio contact, was stationed just offshore of Howland Island. 2 other U.S. ships, ordered to burn every light on board, were positioned along the flight route as markers. And Amelia had said that Howland is such a small spot in the Pacific that every aid to locating it must be available. So she could tell she was nervous about finding it.
Right.
So on July 2nd, around 10 o'clock local time, air took off. Despite ideal weather reports, they flew into overcast skies and intermittent rain showers. This made Noonan's favored method of tracking, which was celestial navigation, difficult. So he couldn't see the stars. As dawn neared, Amelia called the Atiska, reporting cloudy weather, cloudy. In later transmissions, Amelia asked the Atiska to take bearings on her. The Atiska sent her a steady stream of transmissions, but she could not hear them. Her radio transmissions, irregular through most of the flight, were faint or interrupted with static. At 7:42 a.m., the Atiska picked up the message, "We must be on you, but we cannot see you. Fuel is running low. Been unable to reach you by radio. We are flying at 1,000 feet.
So they're not that, 1,000 feet is not that high up at that point, right? I mean.
Right, you'd think that they'd be able to see something.
Yeah.
The ship tried to reply, but the plane seemed not to hear. At 8:45 a.m., Amelia reported, we are running north and south. Nothing further was heard from her. President Roosevelt issued a massive search for Amelia and Noonan, and George Putnam financed his own search until October 1937, but their efforts were unsuccessful. So on July 5th, 1939, Amelia Earhart was declared legally dead in a court in Los Angeles. So a few years later. I did put this down, even though this is kind of unrelated. I was wondering how long it took then for the first female pilot to actually travel around the world. And her name was Jerry Mock, and she completed the flight in 1964. So we jumped from 1939 to 64, which is 25 years later, and then she was able to finish the flight. Supposedly, she did the same flight path as Amelia Earhart.
Really? She landed on Howland Island?
Yeah, I was trying to, that they mentioned that it was the same flight plan as Amelia, but I couldn't see if she actually did fly to Holland.
I mean, when
I'd be scared. I don't know if it'd be like, this is cursed. I don't think I want to be landing in
I think when you get out there into that part of the Pacific, though, there really are not a lot of islands where you can actually land. I mean.
Yeah, right.
But, by 1964, the technology was probably
so
well
much better.
advanced. Yeah,
even like
yeah.
the radio transmissions. Yeah.
So I do remember, Unsolved Mysteries did this whole thing on Amelia Earhart and like what happened, where is she?
Yeah.
And I do remember them saying that she was not, and it's not a criticism, but she was not especially well trained on how to use the radio, and they think that it's like you said, right? So the cutter that's out there sending her messages, she's not familiar enough with how the radio operated, and she couldn't hear them, and so that they think that was
her inexperience was
exactly
part of the downfall.
yeah exactly.
So there's several theories. So you probably already know all these from watching Unsolved Mysteries.
Okay.
But the most popular theory is that her Electra ran out of fuel, crashed into the ocean, and was swallowed by the sea.
Yep.
And some feel that this is the best theory because it's the simplest one, and there's no evidence that anything else had happened to her. So that's got to be it.
Right.
And this theory is also endorsed by the U.S. government. So this is the stance that they took. There was a deep sea company, Nauticos, in 2002 and 2006. They looked for Earhart's plane near the spot where she last radioed, and they have not found anything.
Yeah,
that surprises me that they have not found an airplane.
But that ocean is so deep. I mean,
all these years that have passed, and the number of people who are out looking for her.
Yeah.
And the technology that we have now, you think that we would find.
I mean, we found the Titanic, so like, right?
That's not too far down, is it? Or isn't that?
I think it's probably not. I mean, that part of the Pacific, I think, is like extremely, very deep.
So then there's this other theory of Amelia being a castaway. And this theory poses that Earhart and Noonan landed their plane on
Nikumaro,
Island.
I've heard that one.
Okay. 350 miles southwest of Howland Island. So I did print a picture. I printed out a map. You came last time with like your whole evidence pile.
All my different sketches. Yeah, okay.
And I mean, it's not, when you look at the map, it's not too far off of Holland where you can see like maybe she just started heading south and then she came across that.
So she left from here to go to here.
Yeah.
Right? She flew from Australia to New Guinea, and then the next flight was New Guinea to Howland Island.
Right.
I mean, I think it's possible. I mean, I don't know if she'd have enough gas, but I've heard the same thing that she ended up on Nikumaro. But I'll let you tell the rest of the story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then you can tell me what you think.
Okay.
So a skull was found on the island along with bones from an arm and leg, but scientists interpreted those bones as belonging to a man in 1941. Then, in 1998, researchers from the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery reinterpreted them as from a woman of European ancestry, about Earhart's height. The group has analyzed Earhart's last radio calls to the Itasca, a U.S., well, we already know what that one was, in support of this theory, and on July 2nd, Earhart radioed the Itasca. She gave the call letters, she gave them what line she was at. As we said, the Itasca received, or Itasca, I can't remember how I was pronouncing it earlier, but they had received their transmission, but they couldn't get any bearings on the signal. Okay, so the group believes Earhart and Noonan lived for a long time as castaways on the waterless atoll, relying on rain squalls for drinking water and eventually dying on the island. They believe that, well, actually, they've launched 12 expeditions to the South Pacific, really trying to locate Earhart and Noonan. And the most recent mission that I can find was 2017, but I believe there was probably even ones more recent than that. The reason why this group really believes that they landed here, I mean, there's many reasons, but she never said she was going down. Like in her radio transmission, she's not saying like Mayday or saying we're going to crash. Never do they hear that. They found no floating debris or an oil slick, which I know the Navy and Coast Guard was searching. Like after she disappeared, they were looking for that.
Because that's typically what happens after the plane crashes, right?
Right.
So some of the material would float to the surface, or you'd see the oil slicks or
Yeah.
something like that.
And actually, just what we were saying a couple of minutes ago, there's been 6 multi-million-dollar high-tech searches of the ocean bottom around Holland over the past 22 years, and nothing has been found. They believe that she sent radio distress calls widely received and accepted as genuine at the time for at least 5 nights.
Really? I hadn't
Yeah,
heard
I
that.
know, this was the first I was
Yeah.
hearing about this too.
I mean, you would think that somebody would be able to get down there if she was sending those signals, right? Like maybe the cutter would be able to get down there, or a ship from, I don't know, Hawaii, or...
Right.
Because I'm guessing this happened when, in 1939? So I'm guessing the U.S. Navy probably had ships around there in Hawaii, or...
Right, well, they were doing the search.
Yeah.
So supposedly for at least 5 nights, she's making these distress
Mm-hmm.
calls. But by the time the search planes arrived, the plane itself, her Electra, had been washed into the ocean by tides and surf. He also pointed to bones found on the island, which were recorded but subsequently lost, of course. In 2018, a professor of anthropology studied the remains and found indications that they were Earhart's.
Huh, interesting.
They also found, I believe, a shoe that was, common around that time, a lady's shoe.
Okay.
They found, I think it's called a sextant box,
Okay.
which is like so you are aware of it, like a navigator's tool. So I'm thinking, then they also found like a plexiglass windshield there.
Which would not normally be found on
right.
that, yeah.
And I guess there was also I guess remains is the right word, but where a campfire had taken place.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know, like it's kind of convincing me.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
But the main issue with this theory is that Navy planes searched the 4-mile long Gardner Island / Nicomararo
Right,
Island
right,
without seeing her or her plane.
right,
So who knows?
yeah.
The other theory is that she was captured by the Japanese. Have you heard that one too?
I have. Was that also, well, I'm going to let you go.
Yeah. So she was unable to find Howland Island
Okay,
to refuel, so she headed north to the Japanese-controlled Marshall Islands where they were captured.
okay,
Then there was, I also printed this off, a photo.
okay, yes.
Saying that was her sitting there.
Yep,
and
I've
then
seen that
Noonan, I think,
picture.
off
Yep.
to the left somewhere.
Yep.
So this photo was discovered in 2017 that was buried in the National Archives for nearly 80 years. And they believe it depicted Earhart and Noonan days after their disappearance. However, the photo was later debunked. And there's been no records or anything indicating that Earhart or Noonan were in Japanese custody. So these next 2 theories get a little interesting.
Okay,
And you probably have heard these two, I bet.
We'll find out.
Mysteries covers it all.
that's right.
So is it Amelia Earhart or Irene Bolam?
I've never heard of who that is.
So here's another popular theory, although I've never heard of it. There's an author, W.C. Jameson, who wrote in his book, Amelia Earhart, Beyond the Grave, that he had interviewed the nephew of a former U.S. Army official who said it was common knowledge in high-ranking intelligence circles that Earhart was involved in an intelligence gathering operation. Then there was another author, Joseph Gervais, who claimed in Amelia Earhart Lives that she survived the plane crash and was taken prisoner by the Japanese. After World War II, Gervais claimed Earhart repatriated.
She was repatriated?
Repatriated to New Jersey,
Okay.
taking the name Irene Bolam and becoming a baker, as one would.
I don't know if I believe that, but it's an interesting theory.
Despite the fact that Bolam denied being Earhart, so this woman did exist, and she's like, I am not Amelia Earhart.
Right.
And she sued for $1.5 million. People have still latched onto this theory.
Yeah, I don't know.
You're not into that?
I mean, I just think from what you've described, I mean, Amelia Earhart was extremely talented. She was a go-getter.
You don't think she wants to be a banker?
I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with I'm skeptical on that one. Yeah.
So critics of this theory point out that no government documents supporting the idea that Earhart was a U.S. spy have ever been found.
Yeah, I'd never heard that.
And we have aliens, lasers, and zero evidence.
I'm for that one, whatever it is, yeah.
Oh.
No, I'm kidding.
So, the area of the South Pacific where Earhart disappeared is reportedly a hotbed for alien activity. So, conspiracy theorists imagine that the Easter Island heads were built by aliens using lasers. That there's a skyscraper built by extraterrestrials at the bottom of the Pacific, and that the frog-like statues of Marquesa Island depict an ancient alien race.
I'm for this. This is the theory I'm going to go with.
Have you heard this theory before?
I've not, but I think it makes a lot of sense that,
Yeah,
you know.
sure, okay. And although it is not backed by any evidence, some conspiracy theorists say that Amelia Earhart, while flying over the Pacific, made contact with this otherworldly life. The baseless claim says aliens took Amelia Earhart to another planet, cryogenically froze her, then later on defrosted her for biological exams, and then that somehow led to her founding an entire off-world civilization of alien aviators. Earhart's true fate may remain a mystery, but it definitely isn't aliens, I don't think.
I'm going to say I'm a no-go on the alien theory. Although it's interesting and it's funny.
So Earhart's great-nephew, who I believe was born after she disappeared, thinks the mystery isn't particularly worth solving.
Okay.
And he kind of sums it all up here. He says that Amelia's life was much more interesting than her disappearance. And she really did hope that her flight, or before the flight, she hoped her legacy would continue to inspire others to take on challenges. All right, so what's the theory you're going with?
So I tend to think that the simplest explanation is usually the one that's...
crash into the ocean?
I think she either crashed or she landed on one of these islands and died there. I mean, the Pacific Ocean is huge, and I think, like you said, she was at the end of her flight, right? She's close to the United States. They've been flying for a long time. I think that's, you know, we think about getting on a plane, and it's hard work, I think, flying it. I think it was then. I think it was harder then. I just think I think trying to land on that island, which was really tiny, was going to be difficult on a good day. And I just think that she either missed the island, couldn't find it, and probably ran out of gas. I don't think aliens had anything to do with it. I don't think the Easter Island heads were trying to get her or anything like that. I think it's interesting that you talked a lot about her life before she disappeared, because like you said, like her nephew says, there's so much more to her story than just disappearing, right?
That's what everyone hears about.
But she was I think she was a real role model to women at that time, when there was an expectation that you would be a homemaker or a secretary or a teacher or a nurse, and here's this person that is, you know, not afraid to be like, hey, I'm going to go fly across the Atlantic, and I'm going to try to fly around the world. I think that's great. So,
I mean, I think I want to believe it's, Gardner Island or whatever it's called now, but I just want to believe that. I don't know why, because it really, the end result's the same. I mean, she didn't survive either way.
Right.
But I guess I just like to think that she was that talented, that she was able to realize she was in trouble, fly somewhere looking for a landing zone or whatever it may be, and she got out of that plane.
I think that's very possible.
But then, as I said, like, they didn't find her, and she had to try to survive on that island. And unfortunately, that was uninhabitable.
I think there's been, like, on the Unsolved Mysteries episode that I saw, I mean, there was this guy who's like, oh yeah, I solved the mystery of Amelia Earhart, because he's like an aviation archaeologist, and thinks that he found part of her plane, and he could tell because of where the rivets were on the bottom of it. But it seemed like there wasn't enough evidence one way or the other. I mean, he was convinced that he had solved it, but I haven't.
Was this around Howland Island?
I think so. Yeah. Like that part of it was either Howland Island or Nikamararu.
I thought you knew how to pronounce it.
I think is it Nikamararu? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We'll go with that. Okay. Yeah. But again, I don't know that we're ever going to solve it.
I think in our lifetime so
it's interesting because
what's frustrating though is, like, just quickly, the bones that they measured, and it was first determined to be a male, and then as technology advanced, like, oh wait, no, it was a female.
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah.
she was a pretty tall woman. I
Yeah.
think she was close to 6 feet tall.
Wow.
So that's why someone looking at it would
Yeah,
say,
might think,
oh,
yeah.
it's gotta be a male.
Right.
They can't find those bones anywhere.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They can't find any of the evidence that they had on that
Yeah.
island anywhere.
Yeah.
And it just drives me crazy. It's like, well, what did they do with it?
Right. Because now you think if they had those bones and they had some relative, like maybe her
Yeah.
sister's children or something like that or whatever, they could compare the DNA samples and
Yeah.
they could make that determination one way or the other. So it's too bad that they can't find those now. That's an unsolved mystery too. Where did they
Yeah, I
go?
know. And then that's what starts all the conspiracy
Yeah,
theories.
right.
Like, well, she must have been a spy then.
Right. I had not heard that. I don't have any knowledge of that. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I tend to believe the simplest explanation is usually the one that's true, but who knows?
Yeah.
That was an interesting story. Thanks for the
Sure,
write-up
did you
on
learn
her.
anything?
I did. Yeah. I knew she was, a decorated and celebrated aviatrix, I think is how you'd call it.
Ooh.
Yeah, throwing those words
Big
out there.
words.
Yeah. But I guess I didn't realize like how many records she had set. Like she was really a trendsetter.
either.
Yeah. I think that's great. I think it's good to know that.
And I highly recommend the podcast.
Yeah, I'll have to check that
So
out.
as I said, it's told like a story, and you get to see how she started with flying.
Yeah.
And then it briefly touches upon her disappearance.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
check
Well,
it
thank you
out.
for sharing that. That was
You're
really
welcome.
interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. We haven't solved it, but maybe somebody will someday.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd like to think that.
Yeah,
It will.
yeah.
That will be very satisfying to me.
Yes. Yeah,
That and
I
T.B.
agree.
Cooper.
Maybe
Maybe
someday.
the Earharts, wherever T.B. Cooper is.
Yeah, it could be. Maybe they're together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In their celestial world.
Controlled by aliens.
Yeah.
Yeah. That seems likely. Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of a conspiracy theorist, but that's a little.
Maybe they both flew into a black hole somewhere.
That's
That
possible
hasn't
too.
been discussed.
Yeah. Right. We should talk about the Bermuda Triangle because that's kind of like that's like a black hole for
It
like
is.
alien stuff and missing ships and yeah.
That fascinated me too.
I know. I always liked reading those books about that.
I always thought there was like this imaginary line where the moment that you cross
Yeah.
over it, like forget it, you're done.
Because they'd show you a map or something,
Yeah,
right? And it'd
show
be
you-
like, they show
yeah.
you the triangle. It's like, well, don't cross the line.
I know,
Like,
don't-
don't fly into the triangle. I've solved it for you. But I guess that's not really how it works. So,
No,
yeah.
that's how I thought it
That's
worked.
what I thought it was too, way back in the day. But yeah.
All right, is it time for cookies?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, you grab them.
Sure. Yeah, because this is another fun part of our podcast.
Now you get to hear us munch for a half
Yeah.
hour.
So these are,
Ooh.
yeah, they look delish. Where's the, yeah, there we go. Yeah, they look awesome. I love marble cookies.
I'm gonna break it in half.
Yeah,
while it's
okay.
in the package.
Yeah,
Just
well,
be
this one, yep,
sanitary.
okay. So I'm gonna open this one up first. Love marble cookies. Wegmans used to make the best, well, can I say that? I don't know if I can- Uh-oh.
Oh, I just dump sprinkles all over the place.
So good. This is awesome.
Look good. I didn't mean to take a whole half, but I'm gonna take the other half
Great. These are good.
so I can sample them
Yeah,
at the same time.
yeah. All right, let me get a little bit of this. Yeah. Can't go wrong
Yeah.
with these.
I like the marble a lot. It's got some almond extract.
That's
in
what
it.
I was gonna say. It's like almond.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for almond extract,
Yeah, me too.
even though you can't eat nuts.
I try to stay away from them. I don't want to create any issues, but so don't get any peanut butter cookies. That'd be a problem.
That's very satisfying. So, you're on schedule then for next time, right?
Yep,
Do you know what you're talking about?
I do.
You can give a teaser.
No. I'm going to give you exactly as many hints as you gave me, which is 0.
That's understandable. That's
No, I'll give you a hint. It involves a crime.
Oh. Thanks. Wouldn't it be crazy if I guessed it right now?
That would be crazy. Okay, I'll give you one guess.
You said it was a murder, didn't you?
I never said anything about a murder. Nope. It could be a murder.
Oh, that's what it was. Like, it could be like you don't know if it was a murder, or
I'm not
you're
saying-
just trying to play around. And
I'm not saying anything more. You'll have to wait until the next episode.
All right. Oh, I wouldn't even know what to guess. Don't know.
You'll have to
I guess
stay
you have to
tuned.
wait till next time.
You'll have to stay tuned
Okay.
for the next episode of, generally speaking,
About
about
crime.
crime.